Climate change and the destruction of living systems pose an existential threat to democracy and life itself. Now, there's really no need for me to remind you of all this, and I think, as you're all full aware, as citizens at the moment, as European citizens, we are at a crossroads. Can we reinvent democracy and ourselves as citizens, as to really stop climate change and the destruction of habitats? Or will we allow climate change, authoritarianism and exploitation to rage on? Welcome everyone to this 4th edition of the Forum on European Democracy, a culture of democracy. And with this forum, we aim to reclaim politics from politicians. We aim to redefine Europe and to show that it's up to us, citizens, but also artists, authors, creatives, to shape the future of Europe. And to distinguish between Brussels, Europe, the political machinery that is the European Union, and the idea Europe, so the democratic ideal that it could and maybe should be, where Britain, luckily for Clare, is still very much invited to join the table. So you see, that's already a very big importance to discuss the idea of Europe. And hopefully we then can create a society on this continent that actually upholds democratic principles that I think we will all discuss here tonight. So we are among citizens here, no politicians, I promise, in this crowded house. And tonight we discuss the question, can we save the planet without completely breaking the political system? Or should that actually be our goal? To transform the political system, because the democratic crisis that we find ourselves in and the climatic crisis that we find ourselves in are actually one and the same threat. And I think the stage is set for an incredible conversation, and that's not because of the topic alone, but also because we have a great set of voices here tonight, and it's my absolute honor to introduce them to you, and we'll meet them all later tonight. But first I'm going to say their names, and you can, because we are in a theater, give them a warm round of applause. So it's my honor to introduce Ece Temelkuran, Clare, Farrell and Eva Rovers, and also, of course, Loes Damhoff. So give them a warm round of applause. But now that we've created this atmosphere of democracy, and since the stage is now set for a great conversation on the culture of democracy, it would be weird not to look at you for a second, because you, the audience, also plays a momentous role tonight. So I was wondering, maybe we can just see a show of hands, but who here believes that there's something fundamentally wrong with the way we currently define democracy? And maybe attached, who has lost faith in democracy? Can I see a raise of hands? And might I just maybe ask you on the front row, why are you here? And do you think maybe tonight you can re-find your hope in democracy? Oh, wait, I have to give you a microphone, otherwise the thousands of people at home cannot hear you.
So hopefully I'll gain a different perspective on how democracy is defined, and especially on this very specific and very valid concern. But my faith in democracy has been kind of, demolished, especially over the past week, because I'm not from Europe, but I'm from Turkey.
It could be Europe.
And we had a very tough election period, and it's democratically correct, the result, but the effects, the anticipated results of the situation is not something that I agree with for the future of my own community. So then my faith in democracy has been some...
I'm guessing you're talking about Turkey. And so do you think that the democratic principles and the democratic institutions no longer match up?
Yeah, not in that case for my recent experience, of course, but I also believe that by the time we might actually utilize new tools or new perspectives to change that. Yeah.
And do you think the climate question is an essential question in overcoming this democratic problem that we have?
It totally is, because it's a very valid question, of course, but unfortunately it's been under... how they call it, like it's not regarded as serious that it should be, because everyone else is busy with the current problems that we're used to have. But of course, we need to talk about it in order to see this very massive thing coming up for the entire humanity, how we're gonna take our parts in this discussion. I'm very curious, but I must also admit that I'm not very educated in the topic itself, so I'm really looking forward to learn.
Well, as a citizen, you are definitely educated enough, for sure. Maybe see some hands. There's an eager hand that goes up. Demolish democracy. What are your thoughts?
Yes, I think that our democratic institutions are becoming undemocratic because bureaucracy is becoming too strong. It's taking on some forms. Bureaucracy, our systems are becoming too complicated. Nobody knows anymore what are the systems and what are all the different policies that we have. So the bureaucracy is essentially making our institutions undemocratic, I think.
And in the Netherlands, we have a very striking example of the toeslagenaffaire. How do you think this beast of the bureaucracy in the Netherlands, but also in the Brussels machinery, how do you think this bureaucracy poses a problem for climate change solutions?
Because we, for example, in Amsterdam, we elected a party. We have a city council that's very much wants to do something about to take positive action on climate. But actually, they don't know themselves what old policies hinder their actions that they want to do. Yeah. So our bureaucracy is hindering them, and they don't know how. And I'm a civil servant. We are part of that problem because we say, "Oh, nice that you want this politician, but sorry, our current systems, sorry, we can't." And then they ask, "Well, why?" And then we're like, "Oh, that's going to take a year to figure it out. Sorry." So,
so democratic principles and someone who has a big battle with the bureaucracy. What do you hope to hear tonight? Because there's a lot of talks in and around Amsterdam, in Europe as a whole, on how we solve neoliberalism, how we reinvent democracy. What do you hope to hear tonight?
Should I, as a civil servant, shake or break the system? Should I just say, sorry, I'm going to quit my job? I'm going to, What do I need to do?
Excellent. Do I, as a civil servant, or we as citizens, make or break the system? I think that's actually exactly what we're going to try to answer tonight. So thank you for that. And before we dive deep into that discussion, I'm going to give the floor away again to Loes Damhoff, because Loes will take us far away from here, doing a little thought experiment with us. I won't say too much, but Loes is a UNESCO Chair of Futures Literacy, and will kick us off with a thought experiment about future and democracy. So, Loes, I would say the floor is yours. Give her a warm round of applause.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Kees. I'll be walking around because I'd like to, as a teacher, I'd like to interact with my class. Climate change, future of democracy. It's impossible not to talk or think about the future regarding these topics, right? My job is as a UNESCO chair at the Hanze University of Applied Sciences. In futures literacy, it's not about to think about the future, but it's to think about how we think about the future. So before we dive into the debate here, I want to to ask you to take a step back a little bit and really maybe think about the frames through which we look at these topics for tonight. You probably came here with some, preconceived notions and ideas and opinions, and you asked a question to demolish democracy. Whoop, hands go up. So, but I want us to really, maybe go through a little experiment to re-examine how we think about climate change, the future of democracy, just to really examine the frame itself through which we look. And see, through a different frame, can we look at a debate a little bit differently. Now, my discipline, my work is futures, and that's not that easy. We use the future, we think about the future all the time, but we rarely think about how we anticipate. And it really matters because how we anticipate changes the present. So for us, before we dive into the experiment, I would like to ask you a question. Just to get your minds a little bit into the future frame, and I hope this works. Oh, yes, it does. So, you wake up in 2070. You can ask one question to make sense of the unfamiliar world around you. A question that can only be answered with yes or no. What do you ask? Think about it. You can ask one question to a person, a robot, something, to make sense of the world around you. What do you ask? And I'd like to invite you to scan the QR code. You can scan this one, but there are also some QR codes on the chairs. And for those who are very, tech savvy, please help the person that doesn't look very tech savvy next to you. If you think that, there's something, it's not very smooth. Help each other a little bit. And you come to, if I'm not mistaken, to a Padlet environment platform, where you can press on the plus and add a question. Did everyone scan the QR code? Yeah, can we go to the screen? Yeah, great. So we can see them. So in the left corner, the right bottom corner, you see a plus. If you click on that one, it gives you an opportunity to... It's only yes or no, right? Yes, the answer can be yes or no. I don't see anything. Is it because people are still typing, or? Oh, there you go. Fantastic. Excellent. Thank you. Okay. Excellent. Am I still alive? Did Trump become president again? Wow. Do I look old? No. Okay. Are we still under censorship? Is nature loved? Do we still build buildings? Are you happy? Is our land underwater? I guess that's from a Dutch person, but could be an assumption. I don't know. So, if you're looking at these questions, what do you observe? What do you see? What do you notice? Feel free to raise your hand or speak up, and I'll... Yes, the gentleman with the glasses. We know each other. Yes.
They're very much in tune with what we know today. So they're very much like what we find familiar now is what defined the question. I just now realized that my question is like that as well. So
which one was your question?
Do I have a place to be alone?
Ah. Says a lot about what you like, huh? Yeah. Exactly. It's extrapolation. Yeah. So we're taking these questions, give us a lot of information about what worries us, what keeps us occupied, the things that we like in the present. Yeah. Yes.
I think they're all about uncertainty, and they're about concerns that we've got, concerns and fears that we have now, and projecting the uncertainty into the future.
Yes. Thank you very much. Yes.
Then I was about to say the exact opposite. There is certainty, because I don't know right now, I couldn't count, but many of the questions have still in it.
Yes, exactly. Thank you very much.
Imagine the future. We cannot imagine the future. We can only connect now to future, which is a very, very diminished form of imagination, I think, right?
Yeah, we call it the imagination deficit. Yes, very good observation. There's a lot of times, in a lot of questions, it's the word still. That means, and this is very common, is that whenever we think about the future, we make an assumption. We assume something about continuity or discontinuity. Yeah? The future in itself does not exist. It's pure fiction. The future is, we can define it as the undefined later than now. So every second, hour, week, year decade, century later than this specific moment is the future. And it's unknown. It's uncertain in itself. Yeah? So every time we think about the future, we either make a prediction, or we dream, or we hope, or we fear, but we always do this based on assumptions. Now, some of these assumptions, for example, are there still buildings? Is that you, Raoul? Oh. He's an architect. So do we still buildings? That has an assumption in itself. Yeah? Or can it be a loan, economic equality, world war? So a lot of the language is about the present. And it's interesting to think about if you get an answer to the question, has stuff changed for the better? And the answer is yes. What do you know? Yeah? What it is that you know or you don't know. So this is what futures work is all about. It's not about the future at all. It's actually very much about the present. And futures literacy is the capability that uses futures to rethink the present. And that's what we're going to do in this little thought experiment. Can I go back to the... Yes? Okay. I'm sorry for the people who are sitting in the back. You have to... I promise you there's not a lot of... it's not a lot of slides. So, futures literacy, the capability to use multiple futures as lenses to look and to see the present anew. That's what we're trying to do here today. Yeah, so we're using futures, multiple futures, and this is not an easy thing. You're just saying that is the poverty of imagination. We often talk about it. It's difficult to do because we're projecting, we're extrapolating. It's difficult to imagine something that's not there. So when we do, that gives us a lot of data and information about the present. And that can be super useful, like the assumption that you guys will all be here at 8 o'clock, or the assumption that there's still a glass of wine for me at the bar available after we're done. These are very nice assumptions. But some assumptions about the future, future visions, can limit our imagination even more. They can actually limit our creativity, innovative power. They can keep us hostage, sometimes even. Sometimes they are being used to colonize a certain future. So it's interesting to think about what assumptions are useful and what assumptions that I make about the future are just pushing me in a certain direction, creating a path dependency. And can I open it up to see new possibilities in the present, new ways of doing. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay. Now, you can also use futures to unfreeze narratives. And by that, I mean that sometimes the public discourse or dialogues or debates, it feels like we're stuck. Sometimes it feels like we're stuck in a certain narrative, in a certain idea about the future. And we're trying to get unstuck. But because we suffer from the poverty of imagination, it's really hard to see the cracks in the frozen narrative. And that's why we use futures as well. To stretch our imagination, to share multiple futures, to push at the boundaries. Can we create cracks in some of these frozen, stuck narratives? Can we see different ways of being, doing, thinking, etc.? And by expanding futures and our imagination, we can see that the universe is complex, it's uncertain, and that's not a bad thing. It can actually be quite beautiful. We can appreciate complexity. And from that appreciation of complexity, again, can we examine multiple opportunities that we don't see now. Now, how do I do that? In my work, I ask people to explore future scenarios. Some of them are dreams, sometimes they're predictions, and sometimes they're just outright just absurd, whimsical, weird. And it's not that I say this is going to happen, but just to explore unknown territory, to see, hey, what are my assumptions about democracy, the planet, etc. So, in a minute, I will show you a future of the year 2070. So you can already let that sink in, that we will go to the year 2070. And yes, please do not think, oh my God, how old will I be or what will I look like? That's completely irrelevant. We're just going to go there in our minds. Just going to go on a mind trip. So you can let that go. Go to the year 2070 and I will give you what we call a reframe scenario. Just a scenario that is meant for you to identify your assumptions about democracy and about agency and about the impact of individual agency. Now, this scenario is a bit weird. It's not realistic. It's not supposed to be desirable. It's just a different scenario. Now, when I show it on the screen, I will read it out loud too, I want you to think about it and observe what first response comes to mind. And let that sink in a little bit, and then I'll give you a couple of minutes to discuss it with your neighbor. Okay? Again, this scenario, it raises a lot of questions. I won't answer any of them. It's just what it is. Yeah? Okay. Are you ready? It's a little bit exciting. Okay. Again, not a prediction, not a dream, not a nightmare. It just is what it is. What if, in 2070, power belongs to those whose intentions are pure and can be trusted? This is demonstrated through... Oh, it's not my... No. But it's okay. Yeah, no, it's okay. It's okay. So it's demonstrated through a physicality. It grows when your intentions are pure, you can be trusted, your nose grows. For how long? You don't know. That's the reframe scenario. So the question is, what is your first response? And what does this mean for democracy? And then turn around to your neighbor, explore. Okay. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, thank you, thank you. I know. I only have a few minutes left. So, a couple of responses. So, in this idea, power, intentions, and pure trust is linked to a physical component. It is shown. Who can I ask for a first response and why? Oh.
Nou, het eerste wat bij mij opkomt... Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I forgot. Yeah, exactly. The first thing that comes to my mind when I see in 2070 power belongs to those whose intentions are pure is that would be a perfect world. That would be like an utopia, because I think at the moment that... and I mean with power then the energy market. And I'm not very trustful in the energy market at the moment. So for me, personally, it would be a wonderful world.
Okay. Thank you very much. Who else? Yep. If I don't break my ankle, I think I'm just...
I actually had a very different interpretation because I thought this doesn't sound very different from how it is now. That's based on someone's physical features. They're trusted or they're seen as trustworthy, and power is given to them. Yeah.
And what about the intentions?
Yeah, the intentions. I thought. I mean that sounds very nice. So the first sentence sounds very, very nice. But then I thought, if that's only based on like these physical features, then is that very different from how it is now?
Interesting, just to continue your line of thought, I actually thought that this pure intentions is a bit of a, also, you can have good intentions, but it's not always that the pure intentions lead to about the well for all, or like to really an ultimate good. So how intentions are connected to the actions, and what are the other multiplicity of the network actors that are interacting within it is like, still a question for me.
My first reaction was that I don't picture any democracy here, actually. Because, we're just imagining a world where someone would be assigned power. So maybe something along the lines of benign dictatorship or so, but then it can also not be so benign as that, because, pure intentions and trustworthy intentions can also be very arbitrarily defined, or at least relative, so, yeah.
Yeah, the only thing to add to this is pure intention doesn't mean empathetic to others. It means pure intentions of your own growth, your own power, and so on. So, yeah, that's still pure, but awful.
And maybe still one small thing to add is that intentions are pure and can be trusted is subjective. Subjective. What is pure and can be trusted? How do you see it? I don't know.
The last one. The first sentence that sounds appealing in first instance, but I think the key is in the second sentence. I think it's perfectly anti-democratic to give the power to one specific group, whatever the qualifications are.
Thank you. So these futures are not meant to be realistic, right, or preferable, so it always invokes different responses. Some people, you might like it or you might not like it, but the idea is that what does it tell you about your ideas about what democracy is, or what trust means, or what purity means, or what the comment about physical features. And if that's just, what does that mean for the people that might not have noses? So if we live in that world where you cannot be seen, doesn't mean that those people do not have the power. Yeah. So this is scenarios like this we practice with, just to understand, what does this mean to be in this world as a citizen? Do you feel that you have agency or not? And is it still place for democracy or not? And if it's so similar to this, what does it tell us about democracy now? Yeah? These future scenarios are, this is not a likely scenario, that's not supposed to be like that, but it's supposed to be kind of looking from, hey, if I become aware of certain thoughts and my assumptions that I have about democracy or agency, can I look at that from that different lens, look at the way things are now, and what does it tell me? Can I find maybe some of the cracks in certain narratives and public discourse and dialogues? And those cracks, my friend, Nigerian philosopher, Balie, Akamalafe, talks about is post-activism. Is that if something is so frozen and it's so stuck at the end of the world when there's nothing else, what do we see? Can we find the space in the cracks to explore different ways of doing and different ways of being? Can we dive deeper in that? And not specifically to go forward or backward, but to go deeper, to go awkward in the cracks. Post-activism. It doesn't mean it comes after certain activism. It's just a different way of doing. And by exploring multiple weird, whimsical, bizarre, or sometimes realistic scenarios, we can maybe find just different ways in the present, just because we might have overcome a little bit of the poverty of imagination. So, my question to you, when you listen to the debate, what are some of the possible cracks in the narratives in the debate? Can you look at it, listen to it from that perspective? And is there space in those cracks to explore different ways of agency? Or is there space to maybe explore some new narratives? That's my invitation to you, and enjoy you very much. Yeah.
Please. Oh, right. Okay, this is a bit weird because I'm going to be, yeah. Right.
Thank you so much, Loes Damhoff. And there's, I think right now there are many futures in this room, possibly many futures to crack open. But in the meantime, with me here today is Ece Temelkuran. Welcome. It is truly my honor to have you sitting here in the Balie.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, welcome back, I must say. Just to be complete and just to be official, I'm going to read some words, although I'm perfectly in the know that you are fully well aware who Ece is. But Ece is a highly acclaimed and incredible influential Turkish journalist, wrote for The Guardian, The New Statesman, New York Times, Der Spiegel recently, and you have garnered international recognition for your insightful analysis into contemporary politics, history, especially in authoritarianism, populism, and unfortunately the other side of the coin of democracy. You wrote the books How to Lose a Country, The 7 Steps from Dictatorship to Democracy, one to watch.
From democracy to dictatorship.
Oh, from democracy. I wish you wrote the other book, because then
I know.
it would be so much easier. And Ece Temelkuran, together, 10 Choices for a Better Now, is also here at the table, your most recent book. So first question would be, yeah, the subtitle of your book is For a Better Now, and we just did a thought experiment into other futures. So how did you listen to that?
Louis, thank you for that. Imagination deficiency and unfreezing the imagination. Was it unfreezing?
Yeah.
The narrative. Yeah, this is what I'm trying to do in Together. Mm-hmm. How to Lose a Country, I talked about why we're seeing this rising authoritarianism and why it's a global subject. It's not about the crazy countries like Turkey, our country, but actually it's coming here as well. And it was like 3 years ago, I think, I was in the
big hole?
Big hole.
I'm so sorry.
Big hole, and I remember a journalist in the audience, maybe Kirsty was there as well, a journalist, he was a journalist who told me, but Turkey is a Muslim country, and that's why fascism is rising there. And I said, well, I mean, like, Christianity didn't save you the first time around. Let's see how it works in the second time.
So you were still stuck in imagination.
Yeah. Anyway, so what had happened in Turkey is now happening in a different scale in European countries. Of course, every country is unique, and I'm not comparing countries at all. But there's a pattern. There are 7 steps from democracy to dictatorship. Unfortunately, 10 steps backward if you want to go back to democracy. That's why I wrote Together 10 Choices for a Better Now with the new subtitle, A Manifesto Against the Heartless World. And what I'm trying to do is, one, to crack the narrative, as my dear friend Balie says, which is to say, you cannot fix democracy here and there. Mm-hmm. We have a global problem of losing democracy because we have a global problem with the system we are living in. This problem is inherently neoliberal problem. Climate crisis as well is stemming out of neoliberalism as well. And the crisis of democracy is very much intertwined with the crisis of capitalism. We have come to the end of the system, and that's why our problems are piling up. But the most important reason of our problems is imagination deficiency.
Yeah, and is part of the problem also that we suffer, that we are held hostage in this short-term thinking, that we are short-sighted, or?
No, every system has this magical ability to make you feel like if it ends, it will be the end of time. We are no different than the sailors in the Middle Ages. Mm-hmm. We think that there is the end of sea and we're going to drop to the void if we come to the end of capitalism. We forgot, I mean, like, neoliberalism is such a strong ideology that it made us forget that it is an ideology. It made us believe that it is the natural state of humankind.
Yeah.
It is not.
It's easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism.
Exactly. But then more importantly, some of us already told that they lost their faith in democracy. It is only normal that they did, because democracy without the social justice, with all these neoliberal policies, is just the theatrics of itself. There are guys that we vote for, and they go to the parliament, they so-called represent us, and so on and so forth. But we cannot actually decide on the most important things on our own, such as how much money we're going to earn, such as how many days we're going on vacation, and so many other things, like central things. Because neoliberalism, this system, told us that politics is separate from economy, and we, normal people, citizens, we cannot decide about economy.
Yeah.
And that's why we cannot decide about climate action either in this so-called democratic system, in the current conventional democracies.
Yeah, so, and do you think it's the same problem in that sense, that the climate crisis and the democratic crisis are the same threat?
Absolutely. And now, rightfully so, many people who are in the climate action, who see the urgency of the situation, are already frustrated by seeing that how democratic mechanisms are not working. They're not responding to this most important crisis of our time.
Yeah.
Yes, because those democratic systems are not there for you. Therefore, to protect the privileged and so on. And in order to make them yours, you have to come up with new different tools, one of them being citizen assemblies, one of them being sortition, one of them being, deliberative democracy, and so on and so forth. Although they are not shaped enough, we are looking ways to reform, to transform, rather, the representative democracy, which is already not working for us.
And you said before that you don't think that our problems can be patched. Like you don't solve the democratic crisis by giving separate solutions. But then you do mention separate tools. So how do we go from tonight? So how can we take this discussion from being about separate tools into being something systemic, or something that is about heart, maybe, or about the human experience, maybe?
Two things. Unfortunately, all climate activists will have to come to terms with the fact that they are going to have a really hardcore political struggle. Because there is still this myth, especially in European minds, that if we give rational arguments, people will be convinced, so they're going to solve the problem. However, politics, especially in 21st century, does not work like that.
No.
It works with politics of emotions. That's why I wrote Together. You cannot convince people with facts anymore. Yes, facts are important. Yes, truth matters, and so on. But unfortunately, doing politics is not only limited to facts and truth. Fascists, new fascists, right-wing populists, authoritarian leaders are the masters of politics of emotions. What they do is stir emotions, and the destructive emotions. And what we have to do as progressive people, people who are concerned about climate, who are concerned about planet equality, justice, and humanity, we have to think about emotions seriously as well. Because yes, we are living in the age of fear. We are living in the age of confusion. We are living actually in a very interesting future. Because this is the first time in human history that humanity is mourning in future tense. We are looking at the sea, and we're thinking about the time we're going to lose it. We cannot look at trees or woods without thinking that this summer they'll be gone. So we
cannot
are
even
living.
think about summer.
Yeah, we
anymore.
cannot really think about future in the way that the previous generations have thought about future. So these fears, these confusions have to be addressed. We cannot solve these confusions and fears and anxieties by numbers and, by giving facts.
Yeah, and so in a way you're saying these masters of emotions, the authoritarianists of this world, the Erdogans, I'm fortunate to mention his name for the first time today, is a master of this emotion, piggybacking on fake histories, very strong melancholic feelings. Is it the answer for us to have the debate in civil society about those same emotions, and will we then fight within those institutions, or do we need to get a new democratic deliberative system on the line to challenge the autocrats of this world?
First of all, I want to say this out loud, and you'll enjoy this, honey. Erdogan is not an important man.
Hear, hear.
No, he's not. There are so many of them. And what they have done, especially in the last decade, and in this country as well, although they look blonder, they told us two things. You're going to lose your home to strangers, and I am promising to make our home great again.
Yeah.
So they were actually speaking to a sense of loss, sense of loss of certainty, loss of home, loss of security. This means that even though these guys are really insane, you know, psychopaths, maniacs, and so on, there must be something that is resonating. There must be a feeling, collective feeling in us that is resonating with what they say. So we have a sense of loss. So how are we, those people who are concerned about climate, who want to do, you know, better, who want to better the world, how are we going to address that feeling? Yeah. That is our political problem. And yes, it can be with deliberative democracy, because although I'm quite skeptical about the process and so on, but it says to people, I believe in you, I want to believe in you, and I want you to believe in me. So it might be a way to reinvigorate, to renew our faith in humankind and in democracy. Neoliberalism told us for so long that we are selfish, self-centered bastards, competitive assholes. We started believing in it. We are not that, not only that, at least. I think we are inherently prone to solidarity. We're inherently selfless, altruist, and so on as well. So if we can politicize this truth about humankind, then we can have faith in ourselves and in politics, therefore in politics. Because fascism, what we are going through in the world right now, is the total, absolute lack of faith in humankind. So in order to be against fascism in today's world, we have to have 100% faith in humankind. And then on, only then on, we can have faith in politics and thus democracy.
Yeah. And so then it truly becomes very important to talk about a culture of democracy as a pledge, as something we can aspire to, and not leave to politicians alone.
Because democracy, I'm like, what do you feel when they say democracy? You feel nothing. Because democracy is not an emotional word. Mm-hmm. Look, everybody talks about like, oh, I love democracy. No, you don't love democracy. Democracy is not a thing that you can love. But talking together, being together, the joy of togetherness, that you can love. So we have to turn democracy into certain togetherness that we remember the joy of being human and sharing our humanity with the others. And that is, in its own, a political action. It might sound naive to you, but then if you think that, you know, the definition of humankind in neoliberalism, the lack of faith of fascism in humankind, then speaking about faith in humankind, secular faith in humankind, believing in each other, that is already, I think, the beginning of the new political action, or my dear friend, as my dear friend Balie says, post-activism. Yeah. Yes, we need emotions now.
Okay, great. With that said, I'm going to... No,
are you not satisfied? Are you shocked?
I'm so satisfied it could well be the conclusion of the evening, but that's not the case, because we're going to broaden the discussion, and I think we're going to elaborate on this quite a bit, and I'm very happy to introduce to you Clare, Farrell, and Eva Rovers. So Oh no, you.
I'm staying.
Yeah.
There's a lot of choreography in this. In this thing.
It's always a lot of choreography. It's a theater. Now, Clare, Farrell, please join us to the table and give her a warm round of applause, and Eva Rovers as well. And in this choreography of democracy, we will sit here and continue the discussion, luckily. But before that, I'll introduce you properly as well. Clare Farrell, thank you for being here tonight. An active citizen, for sure, but also a prominent environmental activist and co-founder of the well-known Extinction Rebellion movement. As a designer with a professional background in the fashion industry, you were one of the people behind the name, feeling, and identity and messaging of XR. And in that way, you have played a pivotal role in making the global debate on democracy and climate change anew. So thanks for that already, and welcome to the table. And Eva Rovers, highly regarded Dutch biographer, writer, cultural historian, has contributed to NRC, Trouw, Correspondent, and has written excellent biographies. But most recently, you have turned to conducting most of your research into the citizen assembly and new modes of democracy, or real democracy, if I must believe the subtitle of your book. It is a small pamphlet that I hold here, but it's a very big idea. Nu is het aan ons, oproep tot een echte democratie, which in English would be, now it's up to us, a call for real democracy. So could have well been the title of this evening. Thank you both for being here today. We're going to continue talking about the state of democracy, but Clare, how do these words up until this point sound in your ears? The culture of democracy coming from the UK. As a Brit, we're talking about a culture of
that was the beginning of a joke.
That's the whole joke.
That's the whole joke. No,
I don't even need to say anything. I mean, our democracy is beyond fucked. It's, you know...
End quote.
That's all you need to say, really. We had an in-depth conversation earlier about the sort of... what did I say? Intersection of...
Fuckery.
Vast fuckery. That is, you know, contributing to the circumstances that we have in Britain today.
And how much of what Ece just described about the heartlessness of neoliberalism and just the lack of soul for democracy, lack of feeling for democracy, how big of a problem do you think that is for what happened in the UK, but also Europe?
Yeah, I think it's an immense problem, and I think, you know, the cynicism that is sort of present is, you know, is brutalizing to people's souls. And I think we, you know, particularly in Britain, you know, I can say extremely rude things about our political system, but our media landscape is also just a toxic mess. And you know, the think tanks and the lobbyists and the murky people who are pulling the strings and doing AstroTurf campaigns, and you know, it's a highly sophisticated, energized, and intensively resourced beast that prevents a real democracy from being able to exist in Britain, and it is very, very well established, and it's sort of draped in a sort of, you know, British sort of culture of nothing to see here. We're all very polite. You know what I mean? So it's kind of, it's got its own momentum and a life of its own almost. So if you see what I mean.
So both the media and the capitalist enterprises are so close to the state apparatus that it just becomes one big mess, and us citizens are just here to cynically watch.
Yeah.
The status quo eating itself.
And, you know, the Conservative Party in Britain have gone so off the rails, like they're so mental, that one political commentator wrote recently that the Labour Party is now being crafted in the vision of Keir Starmer as a place that is safe for people who liked Thatcher's economics.
Yeah.
So, I mean, and that is like because the Conservative Party, the sort of the right wing has basically become completely unhinged, and you know, they look insane because they are.
And would you at a stage cease to call something a democracy because it, for example, is a total failure at dealing with something like the climate crisis, for example? At what stage would you say this is a plutocracy or this is no longer a democratic institution?
Well, I mean, there are places with a healthier sense of democratic culture where they're also catastrophically failing to deal with the climate crisis. So I think as a global existential problem, that's not. I think democracies are struggling to respond to that for some fairly decent reasons, right? Like our whole economy is made of carbon. It's a fucking problem. It's not very easy to work your way out of, actually, as much as I'd like to sort of say there's a simple way to deal. There actually isn't. And so you can kind of more easily understand why a problem like that is, a shared issue, and democracy is struggling to understand how to engage with it, even if it sort of exists well. But I think, there's a deficit of the imagination for sure, but there's also like a massive problem with a lack of shared facts and the ability to see things that are the truth. And I know when XR came out and said, "Tell the truth," everyone,
that was the first message.
The postmodernist kind of intellectual people sat around going, "Oh, well, whose truth? I mean, truth is, there's no one truth." It's like, well, there fucking is if you talk to the scientists, actually. And the truth is we are on a collision course with collapse, societal breakdown, and the inability of the Earth systems to actually be a home for our species. Mm-hmm. That's the truth. There's not really much speculation about that. So, there needs to be, for people to be able to have a decent democratic shot at dealing with anything, there needs to be a way of sort of getting access to good information. And I think that's what, the part of the neoliberal sort of success has been, really, is to, turn things like the British media landscape, as a case in point, turn the majority of the public discourse into, at best, some very bad taste entertainment, and at worst, just loads of bollocks.
Mm-hmm. And I can see why that is problematic.
It's quite problematic.
And I also feel that at this stage of the discussion, it would be nice to talk about something of a solution. So I think, Eva, it's about time. No. To put a big burden on your shoulders. No. It's just for you to join the discussion. Do you really think there's a dilemma? Because that's the title of this evening, Dilemma of Climate Democracy. Do you think there really is a dilemma between democracy and climate action, or is that a false contradiction?
I think the way democracy works right now, there's a big dilemma. Yeah. I don't think the way we have organized democracy, the way it is now, it's very counterproductive, because we still are dealing with a 19th century form of democracy in which very short election cycles define just about any topic that we are dealing with, or define every problem we are dealing with. So whether it's about climate change, or in the Netherlands, agriculture, or even things like artificial intelligence, every problem is dealt with in a way that most politicians think will get them re-elected in 4 years. And this results in that all these problems, which we've known for decades, are being pushed forward and forward and forward, and they develop into crisis by themselves, or not by themselves, by lack of action. So that way of democracy doesn't work. But that's just one form. And I think we are very much stuck in, perhaps frozen in the idea that this is democracy. We just elect people every 4 years and then we have a democracy.
Yeah.
Well, that's a very, very unimaginative
very narrow-minded way.
How
do you suggest, because we are sort of stuck in this in a debate, for sure. So how do we get unstuck from that lack of imagination?
Well, I think, first of all, realizing that democracy is a little bit more than just elections, and that we shouldn't be outsourcing politics to politicians, or outsourcing democracy only to politicians.
And decision-making as such.
Yeah. that we as citizens, that's the whole idea of democracy, is not that, I don't know, 150 people get to say what's going to happen just because all the other people voted to them. The idea of democracy is that the people in government are serving society, and also that society helps those people in power to be the best civil servants they can be. But that's, I think, the kind of idea that we kind of forgotten.
Because we did know before.
There have been times, there have been instances in history where there have been other forms of democracy, pretty long instances also. But yeah, I think we need to reconnect with, I think, our imagination also when it comes to democracy.
And how might, because you write about citizen assembly, and you can explain why that's something else than what we're doing right now, but how do you think the points that were raised here today already, it's like the emotion back into the political debate, but also the truth, that there is something of a truth. How may citizen assemblies go and attain that sort of democratic standard?
Well, first of all, I really want to say, well, of course, I'm a big advocate of citizens assemblies, but they're not the solution. There's not one solution. There's unfortunately not one solution.
Luckily.
Well, I would give a lot to have one solution and to wake up tomorrow and have everything solved. Would be very wonderful. But so there's not one solution, and I think citizens' assemblies are an important step, and they can contribute to reinventing our democracy. But a lot more needs to take place. So we need to reinvent our economy as well. We need to reinvent a lot of things. But I think citizens' assemblies can be a very important first step. Do I need to shortly explain what?
For example, you mentioned the agricultural crisis that we have in the Netherlands. Maybe elaborate on citizens' assembly in that context, for example. So what would happen if you would let those two phenomenon loose on each other?
Well, I think what we see now is that this problem of agriculture, which already started in the early 90s, was also one of those topics that was just pushed forward and forward. And now it's a big crisis, and politics have to, well, they just panic and they have to do something. And of course, also the media plays an important role in this, but also the way politicians have communicated about agriculture and what the possible solutions are, both on every side of the spectrum. And this turns this issue into a political debate, and not into a democratic conversation about where, as a society, we want to go with our agriculture, how we want, as a society, want our agriculture to look like in 30 years or 50 years. What's the future of our food, the future of our agricultural industry? That's not a discussion we have as a society. And I think citizens' assemblies can help have that democratic conversation, and also to develop solutions for this very complex issue that are not only technical, but that are social and that are emotional and that are human and that take into account all the different aspects of life and not just the economic or the political or the technical. But what you said earlier, what I think is can be the power of citizens' assemblies, and we see that luckily in some places already happening. For instance, German-speaking part of Belgium, where a permanent citizens' assembly has been established, and where representative democracy have said, we trust our citizens and we need their help. They were willing to be vulnerable as a politician, to be vulnerable as civil servants, and say, we need help, we can't solve every problem in society ourselves. We need the collective wisdom of our society, and we want to we ask people to come and help, to think with us, to talk with us, and to help formulate solutions for, and also to set the agenda, because I think that's one of the vulnerabilities of citizens' assemblies at this time, that many of the citizens' assemblies that are taking place at this time are initiated from within the current power. So they decide the agenda, they decide when a citizens' assembly takes place, they decide the framework and what's going to be done with the outcomes. And I think through citizens' assembly, the agenda setting should be with the citizens.
So that's a very practical, but also very essential standard that you need. But you said something that I think marks a bit of a shift, that the politics itself, the political system itself, has now proclaimed in this German case, we need civic society, we need civil society. And what does this tell you?
Well, I mean, like Eva is right. Of course, citizens' assemblies is not the only thing, and I'm repeating again. I'm quite skeptical, especially when citizens' assemblies become this process nerds, not power blind, as Clare would call them, like, you know, disregarding the power structures in the society, in the state apparatus, and in the economy. And then it could be only a love, 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 let's love each other and speak among ourselves, and how lovely a sandpit that we build for our citizens to make them feel like they're, you know, living in a democratic society without actually deciding on anything.
Like effective. A Truman Show for politics.
Exactly, sort of, yes. You know, we have to be aware that this is a experiment that we have to do. One of my friends in Germany said, actually, it's a great idea, but we have to find a very small European country to try this.
You're more than welcome to.
German-speaking part of Belgium, that's exactly why.
That was a German friend, and I said, you're German, don't say such things about experiments. Anyway, the other thing which I mentioned in the book, and which our friend here from the council has brought up already, which is a very, very symbolic case, actually. Municipality council, am I right? Municipality council, right? Amsterdam council.
I'm a civil servant, not a councilwoman.
Yeah. I know the case because we have spoken earlier, a few days ago. That is a conventional democratic institution, municipality, council, and so on. And these are, as Eva put already, 18th century, 19th century institutions. In every historic turn, when there was a change in communication, there was a change in our democracy, in our politics. And there has been a change in our communication. Now, there is no stage and there is no audience. Everybody is on stage and everybody is the audience.
Everyone holds the microphone.
Exactly. This needs a new democracy, new understanding of democracy. So probably citizens' assemblies will be in this, deliberative democracy will be in this. But also, these conventional democratic institutions cannot be just, okay, let's blow them up. Let's get rid of them, like a pipeline. We cannot. I don't think we have to do that. We can see them as a wreck, like a
shipwreck.
Ship. Yeah. And we can see like our friends or younger people, younger generation who are activists, you know, accommodating these wrecks on several levels. So turning these wrecks into reefs, because institutions, yes, of course, they protect themselves to the new, to the outsider. They want to keep themselves like they are. But then if you push them and push them enough with political pressure from outside, of course they change in the end. So this reef and wreck, together with deliberative democracy, together with protests on the streets, together with cultural wave push, which will change the narrative hegemony. I think things can be done. Also, by the way, we are talking about absolutely depressive things. I do think that something is happening in Europe, and in 1-2 years we're going to see something happening. I'm including Britain as well in this Europe.
Yeah, we all are. We all are. That's part of the faith. But in this metaphor of the reef and the wreck, does it include that a wreck is in decay and a reef is actually always growing? Is that part of the?
It is a new, it's a new life form. You create reef over the wreck.
Yeah.
So it is a living organism, reef. So you can change the institution if you have enough political power, of course. Earlier I said something and nobody really reacted to that. I thought somebody would throw something at me. I said, climate activists should be aware that they will have some hardcore political struggle. Some might think that, not Clare, Clare knows what I'm talking about. Some might think that, we are already doing political activism and so on. No, I think it is very new that they are understanding what many of them, especially the young generation, they understand what they are fighting against.
Yeah.
It is not the states. It's not, United Nations. It is the big capital that they are fighting against. And it's going to be, of course, horrible. It's not going to be, like Greta Thunberg even is growing up now. I mean, she has been this young girl going around asking people to do the rational thing. And now she understood that it's not that easy.
Yeah.
You have to be on the ground doing the real shit.
That's the question. What happens before the ship turns into a wreck? What do we need? Like bombshells, or what happens to the wreck? Claire, maybe open up this discussion to you as well.
Well, I think that the wreck is sort of engineering itself, actually, and we just think that everything's normal, but it's actually just decaying around us. I don't think there's any. You don't think you need to blow it up to make it break, because I think it's highly unsustainable, isn't it? The way that things are. But on this power and recognizing that this is going to be like real political work and not just a bit of activism for the climate, I think it's definitely feels to me like there's a strand of conversation that I'm aware of happening in the deliberative democracy space, which is about how protest movements themselves are a part of a healthy democratic culture, that arguing with each other, like pissing people off by having like opinions that they don't like, that's part of a democratic culture. Disagreement is part of it. Loud disagreement is part of it. And also that movements themselves tend to be quite deliberative spaces, right? People sit together and they go, what should we do about this? And then they all decide to do some shit together, right? So there's a inherent democratic nature to a lot of organising and a lot of work that goes on. And I think, we have got a literature now, which they didn't have in the civil rights movement, for example. I know there's civil rights activists who've turned to youth activists, ones that are still alive, and said, you're lucky you got books on this shit.
Yeah.
Like, there is a field of research on how this stuff works, which
you can actually cite people while you scream.
Which people looked at, before we started Extinction Rebellion, to get inspiration about what works and what doesn't work. And I would say that, like, what I think is we're being met with in the UK, at least, but probably elsewhere, is a strategy to undermine that part of the democratic function, because it's well understood, like how a movement of protest and non-violence works, and how you create jeopardy for the state, and how you get them in a dilemma, and you force them to make a statement, and then you force them to react and talk to you, and all of that stuff has been massively, I would say, by design undermined with the support of neoliberal think tanks, to make sure that element of the democracy doesn't work either. So we feel very challenged in the movements, I think, because we've done so much, right? There's people, last year there was 100 climate activists jailed by the British government. I don't think many people know that, but that's where we're at. I know someone who's just been given a 3-year sentence for a protest that lasted 40 hours where they closed a bridge. So this is what the new legislation that's come through Britain is here to do. It's what it's designed for. Yeah. It's only just being implemented through the court system, and it is a structural undermining of the democratic process by which people who are willing to take accountable action, not unaccountable pipeline blowing up, but accountable non-violent direct action. It's, they're trying to pull away the potential for that element of the democratic ecosystem to exist.
And Clare, do I also understand that you then disagree maybe with Ece, who said this part of the democracy, the Reeve bit, is actually on the same side with the old democratic institution, or it's part of the same solution, but you're saying the current democratic institution are actually counteracting anything the new democracy is trying to do?
Well, the current setup is not democratic, is it? That's the problem. It's that we're calling it the current democratic system, but it's actually boarded itself back into a corner, protected everything it's got, and is trying to secure itself against any threat to anything. And I think the relationship between the state and capital and corporatism is also sort of needs tender examination, because it's more nuanced and more complex than we maybe might have been having the conversation, particularly in the climate movement. But also, we were talking earlier about how if you take a future scenario and work backwards, one thing that we've had conversations about recently, myself and some other people, is what would you do if you actually controlled the state? And I do think that if you want to be serious about addressing social justice and environmental justice and the climate crisis, you probably do have to think about statecraft. And most of the people on the progressive left and the environmental space don't have a conversation about that. Right. They have a critique of what's there, but they don't really have a very solid conversation about how to get power and then what to do once you get it. And a lot of the people I've witnessed in our movement are, they're very critical of people who hold power, and obviously power corrupts, and we all know that, and that's a fact, and it's difficult, and it's not very pretty, and nobody really wants to be a politician, and because we slag them off all the time, and blah blah blah. But in reality, if you need different people making decisions so that different decisions become possible, then you do need different structures that include different people.
Yeah.
But you also probably do need something of a revolution. And I've been talking to people about this for a long time now, and I think increasing numbers of kind of experts have their sophisticated conversation about all of the challenges and all of the points of problems that lie in front of us and where are all the barriers. And without using the word, they're basically describing the conditions that can only be remedied by a revolutionary context that takes hold and changes a lot.
Yeah.
And that's not to say, that I think there should be some sort of violent uprising. It's, revolutions happen all the time in different ways, but it's certainly more that conversation, which is about the power that's keeping things how it is, and the power that we may need to refocus to try and avert the worst of the catastrophe. And on top of that, the reason why I think the deliberative democracy space is so important is because, if nothing else, it's the preparation for people to understand how to manage their own affairs. And we are going to get left on our own by this system, because when it runs to its conclusion, if it does just terminate organised, civilised societies all over the world, which is where it's trying to take us, then you bet they'll go, oh, sorry, you're on your own, folks. See you later.
Californians cannot at the moment get a house insurance, and the state just leaves them on their own, basically. So there is a true democratic dilemma that you just described, which is, we have a democratic system, or we have a system that used to be called a democratic system. Currently, for example, in the European Union, Timmermans is wanting to build the only continent that's climate neutral in 2050. That's a historic anomaly that never happened before, so that is something valuable, I'd say. But you're also saying what we have to create in the same time is much more valuable for the future. So how will those clash, or what do you think? Do we need to blow the proverbial pipeline, or?
No, I think the reality is just sort of more boring than most of the sort of sensationalist conversations would have you imagine. I mean, everyone's paid a lot of attention to how to blow up a pipeline because the title is, incendiary. Yeah. And that's fine, but the reality of a lot of political work is quite boring.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. We're talking about these citizens' assemblies. I don't know how many of you seen a citizens' assembly. It's fucking boring. It's like ages.
Not like.
And you don't want to be there. we love the idea, but you don't want to. I cannot stand it. I mean, like hours and hours of like, and some of them are absolute ignorant people who don't know anything about what they're talking, you know, about the topic and so on. So, you know, yeah, revolution, pipeline blowing, and that stuff, yeah, fun. But actually, democracy is a very, very boring thing.
Yeah.
And you know, the actual activism, and we were talking about that earlier. The boring stuff is far more heroic. Like, imagine a person who thinks that the world is flat and, you know, the climate crisis is just a lie. Try to convince him. And, you know, that is your activism for the day or for this month. You know, convince him. How can you convince him? Everybody's thinking about this dramatic moves, but that is democracy. That is organizing people. It's not, you cannot organize people by, like me, writing articles.
Yeah.
You talk to them, like, you know, one-on-one.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, it's the word praxis, I think, is what's needed in these conversations, because, you know, doing democracy as a culture, as a practice, is a praxis. Like, it's, you know, a cultural sort of thing that exists in society is a commitment to, like, listening and trying to get to the best, fairest solution and do things that, like, the most people can agree with, and having open, transparent dialogue about stuff. Like, all of that, it speaks to me as a creative person, as like a praxis. Like, as a designer, I would say that I'm interested in practice-based design processes, because you're engaged in, like, thinking and doing. And I think this is the other thing that sort of lacks a lot in this conversation often, is that there's lots of sort of talking about what the ideas are and not often connected to doing. If you're talking about ideas and you're doing stuff, then you're holding both things in your praxis. That's a much more constructive way to be. And I think that in terms of recognizing what movements can do, in terms of sort of disruption and changing conversation and all of that, they can also, like, help people understand collectivism. You know, how is it to organize together? How is it to have solidarity together? How is it to, like, do things for other people? And how is it to, like, give away your time and do something kind of tirelessly and selflessly? And that, you know, to go to Ece's point, is like, that's what makes people happy. Giving yourself to something for the benefit of other people makes you fucking happy. Like, and our culture has told you that that is something that idiots do.
It costs
and
you time.
that you should just hoard shit and build your little empire and barricade yourself against everyone else. And the faith communities of the world know perfectly well that a person is never happier than when they're giving somebody some food.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that's why politics have to, you know, that's why I'm telling this faith thing over and over again, because politics has to learn from the religious politics of religion, let's
like
put it that way. Yeah, because I know how Islamists build all this empire in the Middle East, empire of power, let's say, or in Turkey. They did it one-on-one, bit by bit, one bread to one person, you know, when, you know, community building and so on and so forth. So it's not like giving all these fancy analysis about politics.
Yeah.
It's about thinking about power. How do I get the power? But also being in solidarity and not, you know, forgetting that you're doing this not for yourself or the others. And that is the joy of human dignity, I think.
And that's
that
also
will be
the
the
reason
central concept of politics in 21st century. Sorry.
No, I was interrupting you. But that's also the reason why a lot of the people...
Talking with women is amazing. Sorry, interrupting. No, you go on. Like.
We're having a very good time, this practice.
No, but that's also the reason why, although you might think those citizens' assemblies are extremely boring, what we hear from people who take part in them say it's amazing, and they have fun, and they feel happy because they have an actual conversation with other people, and they are amazed by the fact that they can have a conversation with someone who may have different political opinions or completely different cultural background, and still are willing to work towards a solution. And they might not agree on everything, but they are agreeing on the fact that they want to come to a certain solution.
Yeah.
And I think experiencing that, and that's also why I agree with you that it's not only talking about this, but it's doing it. It doesn't have to be a full-blown citizens' assembly, but people have to claim the experience.
Exactly.
They don't have to wait until a citizens' assembly is being organized. They can just go out and organize them and experience what it's like to have a dialogue, to talk to other people, to find solutions. And I think one of the important things of that is also that in the current debate on climate change, especially, well, on both sides, but there is a lot of talk about, well, perhaps we should just need a green dictator, or we need less democracy because democracy slows everything down and we need to go faster if we want to stop climate change. But I really think we don't need less democracy, but we need a lot of more democracy. Yeah. And this does not only, so this includes citizens' assembly, but this also includes thinking about democracy in a different way, in the sense that it doesn't only involve humans. Mm-hmm. I think we also should be experiencing forms of democracy in which we also give a voice to, well, future generations, also give voice to non-human life. And these are all forms of democracy in which we can, well, I think, stretch our imagination about what democracy is or could be.
Along the lines of the great late Bruno Latour. And I was wondering, with that being said, sort of that praxis of democracy, that practice of doing rather than thinking, how do we protect...
Well, it's both. It's doing and thinking.
Doing and thinking, hopefully thinking. But I'm asking you all, how do we protect that very... And then we're going to go to actually doing with each other, so that's better. But how do we protect that which we create anew? How do we protect that from big capital? Because that's something that you brought up, but you also, Claire, you described very vividly how in the UK, state and the capital have become frighteningly similar, or one even. So how do we protect these novel systemic changes to democracy? How do we protect them from big capital?
Well, by, I think, nurturing our democratic self-confidence as citizens. We have to shake off the idea that it's something that happens to us, and that I think, well, and that's something that doesn't change overnight, because we have become so brainwashed with the idea how important this form of democracy is, and how important this idea of economic growth and extraction capitalism is, and that we really need it. We are so brainwashed. So I think the arts and culture play an enormous role in this, and should play an enormous role in this. They are not really taking it up yet. But for us to develop this democratic self-confidence and to understand as citizens that it's with us, and we are the force that can change this, we need to be able to imagine this. And currently, I think we're still very stuck in the same way of thinking, that there is this technical solution or an economic solution. But we need to be inspired to think about this moral transition we have to go through, and a more emotional transition. Mm-hmm. It's not just a technical question or an economic question, but we are so focused on only the technical or the economic parts that we need something, I think, the arts to wake us up, and to make us understand that there are other transformations necessary as well, and that we are the force that can make that happen.
This is what's happening. New generation is coming. They are politically homeless because the conventional political parties do not represent them, even the Green Party in many cases. So they couldn't find a political tool for themselves to be heard. Mm-hmm. And these conventional political tools, we call them political parties, they couldn't find a way to accommodate this new political energy. if these two can come together, like in some way click to each other, I'm talking about political parties, progressive political parties, then political change can happen. Or then we can have deliberative democracy, then we can fight with big capital, and so on and so forth. You need to have political power to do that. And in order to have political power, you have to have masses behind you. And to have masses, yes, you have to change the narrative. To change the narrative, you need people talking, pioneering to change the narrative. That narrative is changing. It's happening slowly, compared to the urgency of the situation. It is like sluggish, but it is changing. It hasn't been the same since last 10 years. And we are living in a new world. This world was set up during Cold War, and the biggest fear was communism. Now those generations are gone. The biggest fear of the new generation is the demise of the planet, like the total extinction. That changes everything. That changes the entire political algorithm. But unfortunately, the conventional political tools could not adapt themselves to this new algorithm. They are too afraid to think beyond the terms of Cold War still. And in many of the places, when I say, well, Europe needs a new social contract, half of the room goes like, yeah. Let's, if you want to save democracy, let's talk about redistributing wealth. Like, it can give heart attack to people, to certain people when they hear this. And in whichever audience I talk to, half of the audience, they go like, yeah, distribution of wealth. And the other half goes, let's not invite this woman again. And the, clapping half,
rattling their
unfortunately, are the young ones. The other guys, they're dying soon. It's not me. It's biology. So these young ones, no, they don't know. 20 years ago, if you say redistribution of wealth, they are not familiar with the fears of Cold War. So they don't know that they shouldn't clap, actually. It's just because they don't know the fears of the old world. It's just because they have true fears. Now the politics will have to change. It's a generational crisis as well.
Yeah. Claire, what will you say about this? The generational crisis and the fact that you need masses to change the narrative?
Yeah, I think one of the things that the assembly field of practice can do is build bridges across divides and dissolve polarized societal relations, and that's going to be really needed in terms of preventing a sort of intergenerational war, I think, given what's been handed down to young people at this point in time. I think if we only, a lot of the time I think people sit and they go like, what's possible, what's politically reasonable, and what seems possible. And we started Extinction Rebellion to say, let's talk about what's needed. And everyone says, well, you'll never go into open rebellion against the state and get everyone to do it. And and we did, and it caught and it captured people's imaginations because we were saying something quite audacious, actually, at the launch of the movement, which was, we'll give you a talk about the state of things. It's worse than you think, probably, and we're going to go and we're going to get arrested and we're probably going to get sent to prison, and we're up for it, and do you want to come and help? And loads of people went, oh, that's appropriate.
Yeah.
It's much more appropriate
Sounds
than giving
reasonable.
someone £5 a month. It's much more appropriate than trying to ban fucking cotton buds. It's much more appropriate than saving a couple of square miles of rainforest somewhere for a bit. It's, you know, it's actually, and so a lot of the paradigm of like change making and the third sector and all the people who claim to be like doing good in the world, they have a very reductive view of how you might go about doing something that's tangible, that gets funded by a foundation because it's viable, it's not too politically challenging, it doesn't upset people, doesn't make anyone lose their shit about wealth redistribution conversations or whatever. And you know, I think we've got to be quite serious, like in the spirit of Ece's writing, to say that there is a need here to overcome cynicism and to seek to defeat it, and to defeat it by generating faith and trust in each other, and by doing deliberative democratic practices, you actually do get to bear witness to people showing that there's a collective move towards pro-social outcomes when people sit around a table. And even if you don't like the outcome at the end of the assembly, you've heard everyone's reasons for their arguments, so you're actually all right with it as well, because you lost the argument, but whatever, like, I can live with it, right? So it's like, this is a soothing political proposition, actually, in some ways. And that's why I think it's a good partner to disruptive strategies and strategies of civil resistance. And because we seek to sort of inflame the conversation, bring it to the surface in a quick, you know, in a short matter of time, and get everyone to go, okay, let's deal with this thing that's now everyone's looking at this problem because there's soup all over a painting, because there's people super glued to the road, because there are, you know, teenagers in prison cells. You know, it forces the conversation. If you meet that with the approach to politics that is inclusive and fair, and it allows everyone to be heard, and it allows everyone to hear one another and see each other, then I think those two seem to me to be like natural bedfellows, which is what we sort of put into the DNA of XR at the start. But I think for a lot of people, the political proposition that we've been making has been missed. And I noted in the British media, you know, there's an independent left media channel called Novara in the UK, and they had an interview with one of our spokespeople recently, and they said, oh yeah, that assembly stuff, you know, that's just like, because you're a bit anarcho, innit? It's like, your main thing is climate, and that's just some bolt on. It's like, no, that's the revolutionary part.
Main thing.
That's the revolution. That's the systemic change part that you've just ignored for 5 years because you didn't take it seriously. Like, that is what we think is serious. Yeah. And a lot of people who are in politics go, well, that's not very serious. Well, I don't give a shit what sounds serious to you. Like, what's happening is very unserious. So, you know, let's just make some unserious proposition back.
Gladly. And I'll gladly do that with the people here present. So if you have any questions for the speakers here, do you raise your hand? But first I'm going to see if we created more or less hope or faith. And I'm going to walk back to the first voice we heard. So how do you feel at this stage? Did we crack something open today?
This is a harder question than the previous, I must say. Well, I noted a lot of stuff, so there's definitely a lot of food for thought. And yeah, it can be recovered, I guess. But I need more time.
And what do you think about that last very strong bit about if it's not disruptive, then it's probably not even that democratic?
Well, in the ideal world, I would agree with that. But my very personal point of view, shaped by the context that I grew up in, I cannot imagine that because I know the consequences. And unfortunately, that sounds a bit too ideal to me still. And I cannot break that thought that I witnessed throughout my whole life. Yeah.
And do you have a question for the people here? Or should I see?
No, I just would like to thank everyone because it has been a wonderful conversation and I did learn a lot. So thank you.
Thank you for being here. I'm going to walk to the civil servant, and then I want to see some hands of people who are ready for some disruptive democracy. But I was wondering how at this stage you feel about making or breaking the system.
Yes, luckily I had some time.
You have some notes.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, oh shit, okay, it's gonna come to me. I think 2 things I can mention. I'm like, okay, I need to do something with that. is know who you're fighting. It's not the government, it's capital. And that's interesting. For me as a civil servant, the city of Amsterdam owns a couple of huge businesses like the harbor. We are 100% owner of that. Okay, we need to, I think that's one main point. This is going to be our next target in our own internal movement. Okay, that's one. And the other thing is, what would you do if you control the state? And that's an interesting one, because so far we always we criticized. We had like 1,200 civil servants that signed a petition that said, okay, you know, guys, you're not doing your job very well, like our highest boss.
Elected officials.
No, because we have to be very loyal to our elected officials, and they want the right things. They're like the pro-climate actions. They're fine. Politics.
Pure intentions, even.
Exactly. So their intentions are good, but the execution is bad. So the implementation, and then if we look for implementation, we have to look to ourselves, civil servants, and also our own bosses, our directors. Yeah. And there we are at the moment only criticizing them and asking them, hey, just, you know, solve it. But I think they're looking to us and be like, yeah, shit, but how? Yeah. So I think we need to get more into the solutions for them. And then not make it viable, but crazy, you know, like really out-of-the-box stuff.
And is there something you want to throw on the table? Because the table obviously threw a couple of notes in your notebook, but would you like to throw something back at the table?
I wonder if how XR is currently doing it in the Netherlands, I wonder, is this how the Dutch people can do it? Because it's like it's becoming very normal to go there and take your children, and it's really peaceful. Take some pictures. 1,500 people got arrested the last time at the A12. So I'm wondering, is this what it takes to get the Dutch people to, you know, go for it? Or... Because for me, it's interesting that it's like so peaceful, and children are coming, and everyone thinks it's nice. Is the niceness the thing that makes it happen?
Okay, interesting. So, and is the niceness maybe potentially also a bit of a hindrance, obstacle? So that would be a question for Claire, I suppose.
Yeah. Do you want me to talk about it now?
Maybe we can see if we can collect one more point from the audience, and then I can see if I can make the microphone unpeep, and then we'll go back to the table. There's a question in the back here. I'll hold the microphone for you. No.
I mean, I can. Okay. It may be okay. All right. So the point I wanted to ask, that you kind of like walk around a bit, but you didn't touch, is like this. There's this. I feel like, especially in the climate change case, but also when it comes to like women's rights in US and a few other issues, there seems to be a problem of crisis of authority, not democracy. People can still vote and people can sum numbers, you know, that happens everywhere. That's not the problem. Like, we can still vote, but why do we not question the system where it is like the simplistic system where we just elect 100 people and expect them to have an opinion of everything, instead of setting a network of checks and balances where people who know about the topic can directly control the people who are, for instance, like ecologists knew climate change from 60s, right? But they weren't in a position, they still have to get to numeric majority, which is how democracy works, right? Numeric majority in order for us to act on it. Maybe that's the problem. Where maybe we shouldn't like commit to a system where we have to reach majority on every topic. Maybe you should like decentralize authority instead of just the decision making. What do you think about that? Because that citizen councils kind of is similar to that, but the one citizen council that isn't boring is the professional conferences, right? Which is kind of like similar. Everybody finds it actually interesting, and there's a lot of democratic elements in it. But you know, it's that's my question. Like, is there a crisis of authority that you think is there that isn't addressable by democracy?
Should democracy also distribute power to those with the most knowledge?
Exactly. Yeah. For the decision making.
One more point here, and then we'll throw those points back to the table.
Yeah, so there's a lot that I'd like to say. I would also, first of all, like to say that I enjoyed it a lot listening to you, so thanks for everything that was said. There was one thing that jarred with me, which was this constant attacking on governments and the people in power, because I really feel like you're barking up the wrong tree, if I may say that. I mean, in my experience, I'm a developer of solar projects and I'm an energy coach. The big problem is that there are millions of things that need to happen to solve the climate problem, and we are too slow because a lot of the decisions have to be taken by individual homeowners, for example. A lot of the decisions have to be taken by people who think, you know, maybe the homeowner after me, I'm already 70 years old, I'm already 80 years old. And a lot of homes, for example, in the Netherlands, which are really badly in need of upgrades, are owned by old folk. Huh? That's the structure of society. So if I hear, we need to empower the experts, you know, and it's kind of boring sitting in citizen assemblies, I'm thinking, well, there's a lot of folk out there who just don't want to go along with the agenda of doing something rapidly and spending money. There are a lot of people who are very happy to continue living as they are and who are now enjoying flying again off to all kinds of destinations with a boom in air travel, you know? So how about all of those people, and how do you take them along? Because I think that should be the target, not the people in power. 89% of the population. That's my point.
Yeah, great. No, great point. So I think we heard how do we distribute power to those who have knowledge, those who are experts in the field, and also, and this bit comes back to the point that you have all made about the intergenerational tension between but in the challenges that climate change throws at society, and also isn't the niceness of the current way we're doing Extinction Rebellion in the Netherlands part of the problem? The Instagrammability of it. Maybe we'll end with that one, because that's a nice light question, maybe.
Yeah.
But first...
Yeah, I'll do the heavy.
Intergenerational and also the power to knowledge.
Eva, do you want to go?
Well, I think we definitely should redistribute power, but not only to the people with formal knowledge. And I think you can have a long debate on what knowledge is. And I think one of the problems with the current way we define knowledge is that it only can exist or be created in universities, for instance, or within science. But I think that what we are in desperate need of is different forms of knowledge and using those different needs of knowledge. So perhaps I didn't... it's not to you personally, but more in general. There is so much focus on the academic knowledge, which of course we do need a lot, climate scientists especially, but also a lot of the indigenous knowledge, knowledge we can learn from looking at nature, learning from nature. And I don't know how we can redistribute power to nature, which I would think is very interesting to
would be interesting to find out.
But there are so many forms of knowledge, and I think we should use much more of those forms. And I think citizens' assemblies are a first step in that direction, and also in making sure that decision-making will become definitely more democratic, because it's not just a few people in power or not just the big companies, but society as a whole that can make decisions.
Great. Applause for that point. And can I also throw maybe at the two of you the question about the intergenerational and the problem of the elderly?
When we speak about democracy, in democracy there are several NGOs, associations, and so on. So knowledge is already present in democracy, in a properly functioning democracy. There are engineers talking about how to build buildings. They are included in the democratic process. And in this case, for instance, there are people who would tell the government that actually right now we have to change everything to solar energy. In normal democracies, in a functioning, healthy democracy, where there's social justice, where there is equality, where there is fairness, these components are there functioning for the people already, for the democracy. What we are seeing today is what we call democracy today is theatrics of itself. It's just a theater. We go to the ballot boxes, we choose, representatives, and then these representatives go, blah, blah, blah. If those representatives, or let me put it this way, why are we criticizing government? Why are we criticizing power? Because that power is the reason that leaves you with this poor guy who has to put money into solar energy. He is the guy who has to afford that. Whereas, do you think the owner of Shell company is left face to face with the consumer? No, government is protecting him more than he protects you, right? So this is a political decision that government makes. So in this political decision, what does the government protect? The old guy? You? Knowledge? The truth? Which is, we're fucking up the world? Or this guy from Shell company? I think it's the guy from Shell company. So how can we trust this democracy where we know that neither the old guy, you, me, the guys, all the scientists who have been saying the truth over and over again are not protected, but then this Shell company guy always survives. So maybe that is why I'm telling, first of all, this is why I'm criticizing power. Secondly, that's why I'm saying, if we want a real democracy, yes, we have to say things like, let's redistribute wealth. Not that suddenly tomorrow I want to redistribute wealth. Mind you, I am just saying this to see where the red line of the system lies. Because if you don't push the line, you don't know where the line is. Just push the line, say it. Let's redistribute wealth next time and then see who's going crazy about it. Why is it a fucking taboo? Huh? Maybe there is something that is missing in this democracy that we are not supposed to talk about. Huh?
Excellent.
Ideal. That's your turn now.
Up on this point, every answer has received applause afterwards.
No pressure.
No pressure.
Well, we had a movement in the UK called Insulate Britain, which came before Just Stop Oil, using very similar tactics, going on the M25, being super disruptive. A lot of people in our movement felt it was a bit edgy. They weren't very happy about it. You know, they thought, oh no, we're the nice people with the families and the kids and the flags and the samba drums and the, bit of paint here and there, but, we don't go on the motorway. That's a bit serious. And they had sort of developed thinking around, firstly doing this push on a single issue campaign, which was to do retrofit, right, as a national priority. UK has really leaky homes. We don't have good building standards. We could have standards that at least mean that buildings that are built now are fit for purpose for now and the future, but we don't. We've got no building standards, so basically people are building really shit buildings to complement our already stock of shit buildings, and everything needs retrofitting as soon as it's gone up, and everything else needs retrofitting because it's old and leaky and inefficient and blah, blah, blah. And so they said, well, if we were taking this crisis seriously, not wasting energy would be a top priority. It's quite simple. Child could work that out. So we need to stop doing carbon emissions. Let's stop wasting them on heat that flies out of the cracks around your window. So let's insulate the entire nation. And let's start by doing all the social housing. Let's do that in 10 years. To do so, if you do the calculations, they did with this construction guy, you have to have at the end of the process, you would be insulating a home per second, because to get it done on time by 2030 or whatever. So you need to train a whole load of people to do it, because you don't have anyone trained to do it, and most of the builders who know how to do it don't want to do it. They want to do other kinds of work. So you've got to train a whole lot of people to do it. You have to build a national infrastructure for people to do the assessments. You have to build supply chains to get the materials, because there aren't enough materials to do it. So it becomes like a really exciting conversation about a national effort for future generations to build an entire mode of operation on a national level to sort shit out. And it would actually be really exciting if somebody would come with that kind of a political proposition. But it didn't, you know, the conversation didn't really get so far. People got stuck on the sort of civil resistance and the tactics, and but sure, the message has been landed about insulation in the consciousness, and it's, you know, gone up the agenda for the Labour Party and stuff like that. What's interesting to me is that if you like sit down with anybody and say, do you think like this is a good idea? They don't go, oh, you insulating ideologue, stop telling me how to run my household. I like wasting energy. Like, they don't do that, because that would be a stupid thing to say. So if you have like democratic processes that are transparent and where people are looking at what's happening inside them, they will, you know, ordinary people will sit around with expert advice and with, you know, expertise in the mix to give them like good advice on the technical details. They'll come up with these, you know, sort of rational and compassionate and progressive things, because that's what like the majority of people want. And one thing from Poland that I thought was interesting was that there was an assembly that happened there where they were talking about cost of living and energy crisis and the energy bills. And a person that I know who lives there said that they sat around, and the older people have got like big boomer problems with big apartments and houses that they can't afford to heat, and they're old and they don't need all the space and it's too expensive, and they've got younger families in cramped conditions who really could do with more space. And the people in the assembly talked, and they said, why don't we just swap houses? You can't have that conversation in normal politics, but like normal people sitting around, well, I've got a problem and you've got a problem, and we seem like we're both all right and we only live down the road, why don't we just swap? Well, that would help us both. And so I think there's far more sort of like glaringly obvious and simple conversations that can come out of these spaces as well, if you know what I mean, in terms of sort of reckoning with big problems.
Thus being a crack in the debate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm not lying when I say that I think this point about insulation and the joy of democracy that stems from it is actually one of the more strong points I've heard about the culture of democracy in this forum on European culture yet, because it shows how democracy, if done right, can actually lead to very fundamental shifts in thinking, and is definitely another way of living life. But I think it also lends itself to a sense of collectivism and a sense of collective like empowerment, and also potentially then solidarity. If you sit around a table with someone who's got views that you think are politically disgraceful, but you need to come to a conclusion that you can both agree on about what you should do about a pressing problem in society, and you can overcome that, then you're proving to yourself and everyone else who sort of bears witness to it that these things are not immovable. You know what I mean? And I think the sense of collective action that you get from a direct action movement, the sense of collectivism that you get from sitting in an assembly, is important if you're going to look at something like what this gentleman's raised, which is basically a collective action problem. And people saying, well, I'm not going to be here, I'll be dead, so fuck everyone else, I'll just leave my leaky house and I won't bother, and who cares anyway, because I haven't got any kids, blah, just
blah.
Die over here.
So, you know, if that truly is a problem, well, that person with those views needs to understand that they're doing it alongside everybody else, that it's part of a bigger project, that everyone needs to do it together, that, you know, other people's survival depends on it. And, you know, I don't know when our society became one where it was an acceptable public conversation to say fuck the next generation.
No.
But we live in a society where that is okay.
Where that's on everyone's forehead.
And I don't think people are okay with it
No.
when they sit together and talk. Are you okay with this? No, actually, I don't really like that. I used to think that you were supposed to leave a world for the next generation to live it, and not live by a mantra of fuck them, I'll be dead.
Après nous le
It's serious, isn't it? It's a serious cultural problem.
I think with this very point, I am going to conclude this evening, because we have been over time a little bit, but I don't think it was a big problem. I'm going to point everyone here to a very democratic institution, the bar of the Balie. And I would like to thank Loes Damhoff, Ece Temelkuran, Clare, Farrell, and Eva Rovers for joining me here. Obviously, tonight I would like to thank Dutch Culture for this wonderful collaboration. I think this type of discussions might actually help us to find the democratic self-confidence that you described, and it can be very exciting and very unboring indeed. And even a discussion about insulation can become a love letter to democracy itself. So if someone doesn't lose their shit, it's probably not democratic. I'm going to remember that one. This was a program created by the Balie's very own and the great Rosalie Dielissen, together with Dutch Culture's Simon de Leeuw. My name is Kees Fukema, and thank you. Have a very good evening.
Thank you.